Hi, I'm back again with another craft project that is incredibly self-indulgent, and I'm sharing it with you so that the other 12 people who want to make one can. This is Astarian Part 2. This hyperfixation, we're in it for the long haul. Like, this is not going away. I have this Astarian plushie now. How do I carry him around? I need a bag or something. Oh yeah. Doesn't it look so good? I popped off on this one, guys. Sorry, I got COVID for Christmas. As always, all my materials listed in the description. I'll have the PDFs for these charts on my website for free. I will link that in the description as well, so you can have access to all of that good stuff. Please don't share them or distribute them. Direct people to my website kindly, or to this video, even better. I'm really trying to work towards monetization on this channel because I don't love charging for patterns. It is super fair and valid to charge for your patterns, and you totally should if that's what you want to do. I would much prefer to just make money from this YouTube channel. I love the accessibility of free patterns. I use free patterns all the time, so I love to be able to give that to people as well. But that being said, word of mouth and credit, those are really important. If you feel like selling your finished projects, that's super cool with me, although it might not be cool with Larian, just so you know. Just please credit me with writing the original pattern. There will be timestamps in the description. I don't know how chapters work yet. I'm figuring it out. I'm learning. Also, another thing, my husband and I have been streaming Baldur's Gate every Friday. Join us for that. That's a really fun time. We've been using it mostly for practice because I have some new audio stuff that I've been kind of fiddling around with. We just fixed his audio situation. I'll also be doing some crafting streams on Twitch in the near future. Follow me on Twitch. I'll put that in the description below as well. Twitch.tv/BethThePisces. He is twitch.tv/DembyGames. I'll also link him down below. So yeah, if that's something you're interested in, check us out on Twitch. I don't think there's any more housekeeping to do at the front, so without further ado, let's get into the Happy Bloodless bag. Okay, so for your materials, you are going to want your yarn first. You can use any kind of yarn you want. I'm using Lily Sugar and Cream cotton yarn. I have 2 of these big rolls of each color. I used red, black, and white. 2 of these is a little overkill. You can work with a few of those like little skeins. Sometimes it's helpful to have multiple skeins to work from, just so you're not carrying yarn over like big stretches. That'll make more sense to you once we get into the pattern itself. So a couple skeins of each color. You won't need this much. I just got these again because I knew I was going to use them. I also like to overbuy rather than underbuy because specifically with these sugar and cream yarns, I notice that between dye lots there can be a huge variance in color, especially with these black ones. Sometimes they look a little blue, sometimes they look a little gray, so I like to get them all from the same dye lot just so that they look consistent. So here's my label, here's the color. This is the batch number. You like to get colors of the same dye lot or the same batch. Even if they're both marked as red, sometimes there can be a lot of variance from batch to batch. Anyway, that was a bit ranty. So you need your yarn. You can use any yarn you want and use the corresponding hook size. But for this one, I'm using Lily Cotton and Cream in red, black, and white. I'm also going to use a 5mm hook and a 5.5mm hook. This I use for the chain at the beginning, and then this I use for the rest of the work. So you can get away with only a 5mm hook. I just like to use both of them. You're going to need a darning needle. I have this little container with all of my needles in it. Gonna need those. You're gonna need scissors, obviously. You're gonna need some fabric and sewing supplies if you would like to make a lining for your bag. And of course, you're gonna need your grids. I have mine printed up here because I noticed there were a few of you who requested printable PDFs rather than a link to Stitch Fiddle because you don't have a computer or it's kind of hard on your eyes to look at a screen while you're crocheting. Super fair. So I will have links to a free download on my website of both of these, and I will also have links to the Stitch Fiddle grid so that you can use it however you would like. So to start off, I am going to chain the number of stitches in our first row +1 with my main color, which is red. And in this, I have 59 stitches across my first row, so I am going to chain 60. And I am chaining with my 5.5mm hook because sometimes my chains can be very tight and it causes the bottom of my work to curl up on itself. So if you size up your hook when you make your chain and then size back down to the regular size hook for the rest of your work, it will make your chains a little bit looser and it will help you with that if that's an issue for you. Certainly is for me. My tension is crazy. So now I'm going to switch to my 5mm hook. I won't need that 5.5 anymore, so you can put that away. So there's our chain, and now we're going to move on to row 1. And I am just going to single crochet in each chain across, starting with the second chain for my hook. And for my grids, I always like to have a couple of rows just in that main color before we start color changes, just because I think that makes it nice for like weaving in your ends. And this piece, since we're making a bag, it gives us a little space on the sides to do our sewing up the sides without it cutting off any of our design. So I have 2 rows of just red on the bottom and on the top, and then 2 columns of just red on each side. And I don't know if I mentioned this already, but we are working with single crochets. So we finished our first row of single crochets. If you are using Stitch Fiddle, move up a row. If you're using a printed out sheet like I am, you can just mark off this first row however you like. I'm using a highlighter. So now to start row 2, what we're gonna do is we're gonna chain 1, we're gonna turn, and in our first stitch, we are going to single crochet normally. But in the rest of the stitches, we are going to single crochet in the front loop only. And I'll show you what that means. So you can see when we rotate our work a little bit, the tops of each stitch has a back loop and a front loop. The front loop is the loop closest to you, and the back one is the one furthest from you. Normally you work through both of these loops like this, but we are going to work in the front loop only for row 2. Single crochet is normal, just in the front loop. And we are going to do that in each stitch except for the very last one. And in that very last stitch, we are going to single crochet through both loops, just like normal. If you really don't want to worry about front loop and back loop and whatever, just single crochet like normal. It's not a huge deal. It'll still look really good. I just think it looks better when you do it this way. We are going to be alternating rows of front loop only and back loop only single crochets so that the front of our panel looks really nice and clean with all those color changes. And I will explain exactly what I mean and show you an example once we get there. Okay, now my last stitch here, I'm going to single crochet like normal through both loops, and that's the end of row 2. Now for row 3, I'm going to chain 1 and turn, and this is the first row of color changes. What we're going to do is we are going to single crochet right here, and that first stitch is normal just like last time, but now we're going to start single crocheting in the back loop only. Okay, and a couple things about following the grid. When we're looking at our grid, this is our view from the front. So there is a front and a back to our work always, right? When we're looking at the front, we are going to be working on the grid from right to left. And then when we turn our work and we have the back facing us, we will be working from left to right. Okay, that's a pretty important thing to remember, especially when you're working on grids that are not symmetrical. Sometimes grids are perfectly symmetrical and it does not matter which side is left and right because they're both the same, right? But in this case, it does matter. Now, in row 3, since this is our first row of color changes, we're gonna want to know how many stitches of red we need to make before we hit that first black stitch. And for us, that first black stitch is stitch 41. So we are going to have 40 stitches of red before hitting our color change. And again, these are in the back loop only. We're alternating front loop only and back loop only. I do that because it just looks cleaner. You can see here specifically, sometimes you're left with very jaggedy looking color changes when they're placed on top of one another. These lines that you make by alternating back loop only and front loop only keep the work cleaner. They make your lines sharper. It just looks a little bit better. Now again, if you're a super beginner and you are not interested in worrying about front loop only and back loop only, that is totally fine. It will still look super awesome. But if you're a little more advanced and you would like to level up your work a little bit, consider this method. So I'm gonna get those 40 stitches in before my color changes, and I will meet you once I get there. When we get to our 40th stitch, this is our stitch right before we change to black or our second color of choice. We are not gonna yarn over and pull that last loop through. What we're gonna do is we're gonna introduce our second color here just by putting that on our hook and pulling that through. And what that means for us moving forward is that the top of our first black stitch right here, I'm going to work over my tail a little bit, That makes the top of this stitch black. If we had not done that, the top of this stitch would have been red, and I personally find that a little confusing when we're working with a grid. Visually, does it make a huge difference? No, not really. It just kind of makes your job easier moving forward. So, and I'll show you how to do that one more time. Our first color change is in stitch 41. So stitch 40 is going to be red. I'm going to insert my hook, pull up a loop, and instead of finishing off, I am going to change color here and pull that new second color through so that in my next stitch, the top matches. Now, for this particular pattern, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stitches in black. So here's our second. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's our last stitch in black. I'm going to finish it off with red and finish that row with our original color. You want all your tails and all of the ugliness to be in the back of your work, always. So make sure everything that hangs out is in the back, because that'll be hidden. Nobody will see it. Something to consider. When we pull our original color over to the other side, it leaves this here. That's just hanging. So you can either work right on top of it. It does sometimes show color through, so that has to be up to you and what you want. I think it's perfectly fine to leave this hanging, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this into a bag and I'm going to line it with fabric anyway, so it'll be kept nice and safe. If you're making a garment, sometimes these will pull on like the little bra clasps or something. That can be kind of annoying. So consider working over this just by single crocheting right on top of it. Another thing to keep in mind is you don't want to pull this too tight, otherwise it will cause your work to pucker like this. So leave it nice and loose. It'll be fine. That's all. Finish off this row, back loop only, until the last stitch. And in the last stitch, we are going to single crochet through both loops as normal. So now, we're going to chain one, turn, and move on to row 4. We're going to single crochet in that first stitch as normal. And now we are back to single crocheting in the front loop only. When the back of our work is facing us, so we're looking at the back right now, we're single crocheting in the front loop. When we're working with the front of our work facing us, we're going to single crochet in the back loop. And it's going to be that way for the whole thing, alternating back and forth, and just follow your grid. I don't really have any other instructions for you guys. Just count your stitches, do what the grid tells you to do. It will not lead you astray. It really is as simple as that. So now to make the straps. I know I'm using black yarn, so it's not super easy to see, but I'm going to make a chain of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Feels wide enough for a strap. Then I'm going to single crochet in the second chain from my hook and all the way across. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then I'm going to chain 1 and turn and single crochet across. I'm just going to do a bunch of rows of single crochets. I don't know how many I'll end up doing. This is kind of up to your preference. Just make the straps as long as you would like them to be. I'll show you and let you know how many rows I did. Got my bag here for reference. I have made 87 rows of single crochets, which seems like a lot, but it goes quick because they're just really short rows. And I'm happy with the length of these. So I'm gonna make another one, and then I will meet you back for the next step. Okay, so now I have my 2 straps here. They're the same length. The length doesn't matter as long as you're happy with it. Make them as long or as short as you would like. And then I'm going to find somewhere in the very last row to attach these. I think I'm going to attach mine about here, 8 stitches in on either end, and stitch them again just right here at the very last row. I'm going to use this red color to sew them on, and I'm going to sew them to the back so that it gets hidden when I sew my lining in. So attach these straps however you prefer. Just make sure they're in the same spots on each side. Repeat it for both sides, and I'll meet you back when I have done that. So now I've attached the handles to both of my panels. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take both of these panels and I'm going to set them so that the right sides are facing each other. So here is the right side of this panel, here's the right side of this panel. I'm going to put them one on top of the other so that those right sides are touching. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to slip stitch these 2 pieces together, starting at one side, going down, across the bottom, and then up the other side. Obviously, we're just gonna leave the top open. So yeah, I'm gonna do that, and then I'll meet you back for the lining. Okay, so now that we have stitched up our sides and the bottom, you can sew in your ends, flip this thing right side out, and you have a functional bag, my friend, at this point. Now, I do not want to sew in my ends, because who wants to do that? So I'm going to show you how to do a lining. But if you don't want to do a lining, you're good, brother. Like, this is a bag. Now for the lining, I flipped my bag back inside out just so that it lays a little bit flatter. And I got this black fabric. It's just remnants because you don't need a ton. I'm going to lay this flat out on my desk. My desk isn't very big. It would definitely be easier to do this on like the floor or any like open flat surface. So here's my lining. It is folded in half. There's a fold at this edge. This is going to be my bottom so that I don't have to sew it up at the bottom. I'll just have to do the sides and the top. But yeah, so this is folded, so I will have like one long piece. You can cut out 2 pieces if you want, but I like to keep this folded at the bottom. So I'm going to place my bag on top of this fabric here. We don't need to be super exact, it doesn't matter. Okay, so now you can see quite a lot more. Again, the fold is right down here. I'm going to cut so that these sides line up exactly with my bag, and I'm going to leave a 1/2 inch to 1 inch extra at the top. So I'm going to do this right now. There we go. Doesn't need to be perfectly straight, it doesn't matter, it's going to be inside the bag, so it doesn't need to be gorgeous. But now we have this piece that's a little bit taller than our bag and exactly the same width. So for this next part, I'm just going to be using a needle and thread. I apologize for using black again. It is what it is. Here's my fold down here. I am just going to sew up the sides, up here. Nothing fancy, just needs to hold together. You can use a sewing machine if you have one. I have a sewing machine, but it's brand new and I don't 100% know how to use it yet. So just to make it a little bit easier on myself, I'm just going to do this by hand. So I'm going to do that now. This fabric is the same on both sides, so there's no like inside or outside, but if you do have an inside or outside, you are going to want to sew this inside out. I've sewn up the sides of my lining. It's inside out right now, so I'm gonna flip it right side out. The crochet part of my bag is still inside out. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put my crochet bag inside of the lining here. Doesn't have to be perfectly flat or anything, because all we're going to be doing is attaching the top here. do the lining. We want to make sure all of our hangy strings and stuff are tucked away in between the lining and the crochet panels. So take a minute to do that. I'm so sorry I've chosen black again. I don't know what's wrong with me, guys. I know you can't see it. I'm just a monster, I guess. So the two things we want to keep in mind. We want to keep the seam for our lining in line with the seam of our crochet bag. So we want to line those up, and you can pin those in place so that they don't go anywhere. And the second thing we want to do is we want to take this raw edge here of the fabric and we want to fold it inward by just a little bit, pin it in place. So I'm actually going to start over here at the seam, line those up, fold it over by a ½ inch, and then I'm going to pin that right up against the seam. There we go. And then I'm going to do that on the other side as well. Just go right over to the other seam and pin it in place. And again, you're going to want to keep aware of all of these little strings. Make sure that they are tucked away on the inside, nice and hidden. Okay, so now we have our seams all lined up. We can pin everything in between. And again, I'm going to be hand sewing this. You can totally use a sewing machine. Just be careful because it is kind of tricky with crochet things. Sometimes it can get stuck in your machine. So just be aware of that. And this will probably take a little fiddling with. The crochet can be very stretchy and fabric not so much. So just take your time, pin as much as you need to. Now I'm going to fiddle around with this a little bit more. I do like to have this top edge of the crochet. You can kind of see it on this side a little bit better. I like to have this kind of top edge of the crochet go a little bit taller than the lining, just so that the lining is a little bit harder to see from the outside. So I'm going to do a little bit of fiddling and kind of shift this down a little bit and get it exactly where I want before I start sewing. So I will meet you back when everything's pinned in place and I'm ready to start. I've finished my fiddling. Looks really nice, I think. You can see from over here. You can't really see the lining from the outside, so that's the goal here. Is this is going to be a little bit taller than the lining, just that you can't see it. And yeah, now I'm going to start sewing. Be careful, obviously, very pointy, very sharp. And if you are running this through your sewing machine, just like be careful, because this shit, it gets stuck sometimes and it's really annoying. So be careful, take it slow. Yeah, so I'm gonna get started. As far as stitching the top goes, I do not know much about hand sewing. I'm doing some kind of weird variation of a back stitch. A back stitch should work great. There are tons of tutorials on YouTube. They're like fairly easy to do. And I try to keep my spacing within my crochet stitches. It both acts as a kind of guide and it hides the thread on the other side as long as you pull your stitches tight enough. Don't pull them too tight. It's not necessary. But as long as they're not loose, you shouldn't be able to see them. Like, I'm using black thread and you cannot see it on this side at all. I wish I can give you better descriptors, but I do not hand sew very often, and I'm just kind of winging it, and you can totally wing it too. It'll be fine. Now, you have a very sick bag. You're going to turn it inside out, or right side out rather. Oh yeah, that's sick. Look at that, guys! That is so sick. We made that. Now put lots of stuff in it and carry it around everywhere. You're gonna get so many compliments, it's gonna be crazy. So there it is. I hope you love your bag. I love mine. I'm certainly gonna be taking this thing everywhere I can. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you love your bag. Again, please don't distribute the graph or anything. If you have any questions, feel free to pop those into the comments. I pop into the comments every once in a while to help people out. If you are in dire need of assistance, email me. I'll help you out. Again, these grids for free on my website, linked below. Enjoy your bag. We popped off on this one. Let's go. Anyway, subscribe if you want to. I try to make a pattern every month. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.